think he's on the way. He should be coming through the door in just a little bit. And thank the staff of Cory Booker. And we just thank you all for being here. Just feel free to use our facilities as you see them here. St. Cedric,
Yes, he can.
All I need to say and just turn it over coming into Bucksport area. I tell you, I just can't believe that it's unbelievable to me, but God be the glory.
All right, good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks everybody for coming here. This is a great turnout and we need to see this kind of activism going forward. Whether it's healthcare, education, but maybe most importantly, the hate and violence that we've seen have to be turned around. We know that our Democratic candidates are going to do something about this, but it's on us too to do something.
That's right.
This is not a time for us to stand idly by. We've all got to get active. So I just told you about our table out here. Please, if you need to register, you need help with registration, please can speak to them. But please, you need to get active. You need to do something this time around. This is not an election that anybody can sit out. It's not an election where we can deal with only 50% of the electorate going to the polls. Everybody needs to get out. So in looking at Senator Cory Booker's website, he's wrote a couple of things that hit me. One is the lines that divide us are nowhere near as strong as the ties that bind us. And that is no more true. It's more true today and more necessary today than maybe it's been in quite some time. But we've seen a lot of things happening that none of us are happy about, and again, a reason for being active. So Senator Booker was a councilman in the city of Newark, New Jersey. He then became the mayor, and he was the mayor from the year 2006 to 2013. Now, I'm going to tell you that I grew up in a town called Irvington, New Jersey. Irvington, New Jersey. So when I tell you that some of the things that he did in his first term as mayor were to double the amount of affordable housing and to cut the deficit of what the city owed in half. Those are remarkable statistics on their own. But when you consider what he inherited, Newark for decades had been left unattended. Basically, nobody was doing anything for the city of Newark. And I go back to the 60s. What he accomplished in that first term is amazing. As a senator, and he's been a senator since 2013, he's worked for equal rights, and equal rights for everybody, every group that you can think of, he's been in there in the forefront. He's got a liberal voting record. And one other thing that I'd like to mention, and we could go on forever and ever, but I'm sure he's going to spend some time on this, is he's been very big in prison recidivism rates.
There he is.
And working to get those recidivism rates down.
Welcome.
He's a politician who lives with his constituents in the central part of Newark. And again, I'll go back to the fact that having lived in a town that's right next to Newark, I can tell you that the things that he has said about where he lives and the fact that he works with people that are most need his help in Newark are absolutely true. I've driven through that area of Newark, and it's true. Finally, on the website, another thing that the Senator has said is when people join together, we can achieve things that other people tell us are impossible. That's all you need to know about Senator Booker. And with that, I'd like to welcome...
Just one minute. On behalf of the Bucksport Senior Center, my name is Deborah Austin, the manager here. We would like to present a clip to you that was handmade by our seniors here.
Well, that is incredible. I'm ready for those New Jersey winters now. You know, some of y'all, my family has lots of different roots. My dad's from North Carolina, Hendersonville, North Carolina, right over the border. My mom was born in Detroit, but my grandma was from Des Moines. And it was my family was miners who came up from Alabama. And moved to mining in Buxton. But the reason why I start with that is that quilt reminds me of the stories of Buxton, Iowa. Buxton, Iowa was this town in the early 1900s where European immigrants and black migrants from the South actually joined together. They called it an American utopia because many generations before we started having civil rights and immigration, this was actually an integrated town where these miners could descend into the mine together, scrape out their American dream from the earth and come up. And one of the stories they used to tell is how they had these quilting bees, where you had everybody bring in their own stitch of fabric, Eastern European, Western European, African American, and they would stitch it together into one cloth. And it was such a powerful metaphor for our nation. And so I cannot tell you how excited I am to be here. We've had a dark few days in America.
Yes.
But I often know that as a good book says, sometimes you got to go to the pit before you go to the palace.
All right now. All right.
And we big men endure through the night.
Yes, you will.
And so I want you all to know, I want to talk about a lot of the issues, and I want to answer as many questions as we can. And I'm going to give a remarkably short opening remarks. I want to get to it. I see my friends here talking about prescription drug costs. I want to talk about that. I got some senior citizens. I want to talk to you about Social Security.
Yes.
Deeply unfair laws that we have in this country. But before that, I just want to open by talking to you all about love. Now, you don't necessarily hear presidential candidates start talking about love. But I want you all to know why I'm running. Why I got into politics in the first place. In 1998, I ran for city council. Life is about purpose, not position. And my purpose was the same. We thought if we could organize stronger bonds in our community, we could take on the big challenges, from slum wars to politicians who had lost their way and become a little corrupt. And we knew that by bonding together, we could show our strength and make dramatic change. Now, I want to tell you, I believe that patriotism is love of country. But what we forget is you can't love your country unless you love your fellow countrymen.
That's right. That's right.
not an emotion. It's not what we hear when we put on the radio, ooh, baby, baby. That's not what I'm talking about what King called, he evoked the Greeks, they called it agape love.
That's right.
It's a love that says, hey, we have common cause. We have common purpose. We share a common destiny. Love says that if your children don't have a great public school to go to, my children are less off. If your mother or grandmother is denied dignity in their retirement, it's an assault on my dignity. Love is what made people, blacks and whites, Christians, Jews, storm beaches everywhere from Iwo Jima to Normandy together. It's what made Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner, black and white, Christian and Jewish, die together in Mississippi. It is the love, the common cause, the common purpose, this understanding, as King said, that we're all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. And I want you all to know, you got to know the values of your candidates. I am here because of a conspiracy of love. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, 50 years ago, this summer, my parents were moving from the South to a state called New Jersey. And every time they would show up in New Jersey to look at homes in the nicest neighborhoods with the best public schools, my mom wanted me to have the best of schools, they would show up and these would be white towns and they would see a black family and the real estate agent would say, I'm sorry, this house is sold. This house will come to order. And so what did my parents find? They found these patriots, black and white, in fact mostly white, that met in that town on the weekends and said that we are not going to wait for the president or the Congress to solve these problems. We are American patriots. And here are some strangers coming into our community. We know what our faith traditions talk about welcoming the stranger. And they said, we're going to help you. So they organized this conspiracy of love. And they actually said, okay, you guys go look at a house. If you're told it was sold, you leave, and we're going to send a volunteer white couple to go right behind you. And they will find out the house is still for sale. And so in the house my parents, that I grew up in, my parents were told the house was sold. The white couple found out the house was still for sale. They pretended like they liked the house. Oh, it's a beautiful home. Grout work, look at the grout work. And they put a bid on the house, the bid was accepted, papers were drawn up, and then on the day of the closing, the white couple did not show up.
All right now.
My dad did, and a volunteer lawyer. And they walked into the real estate agent's office, and the real estate agent was shocked that he was caught, didn't give up. He stands up so angry at my father and his lawyer that he punches my dad's lawyer in the face. He sings a dog on my dad. Let me say this, I was growing up in this beautiful home. Every time my dad would tell this story, the dog would get bigger. I was 18 years old. And my dad's like, boy, I had to fight a pack of wolves. This is our story. This is why we're all here. Look around this room. Stony the road we trod.
Yes.
We have come over hard ground.
That's right.
Difficult road. But every time we saw demagoguery and bigotry rise up in our country, it was Americans, good people, who said, this is not who we are.
That's right.
Now let's understand, every generation has had hatred and bigotry and demagoguery. The gardens of our democracy have never been free of those weeds. But how do we pull them up? How do we get rid of them? That's what we should ask ourselves in this moral moment. First of all, we didn't pull them up by just sitting there on the sidelines looking at them. Change doesn't happen that way. You all think we got women's rights in this country because a bunch of men suddenly decided on the Senate floor?
No.
Hey, let's give those women
No.
right to vote. No.
No.
It came through activism, suffrage movement. It came from multiracial, multi-ethnic coalition. Frederick Douglass's last meeting he attended before he died was a suffrage meeting. Because he knew that his justice, his rights were wrapped up in those of women. The second way we've won and got rid of these weeds is not just being active, but by not taking on the tactics and the spirit of the weeds we were trying to remove from our gardens. Now this is very important because I hear a spirit that is understandable that we're being drawn there. I was going into the town hall in Iowa and I'm about to run up on the stage and the big guy sees me. I'm a big guy. I'm a former tight end for Stanford University, former All-American football player. The older I get, the better I was. The big guy puts his arm around me and goes, dude, he goes, I want you to punch Donald Trump in the face. And then I go, dude, that's a felony. Come on now. Don't let hateful people pull you to hate.
That's right. That's right.
I get this feeling sometimes people don't understand. You can't beat hatred with hatred.
That's right. That's right.
Dark if you get dark yourself. This is the time we need to be doubling down on the best of who we are, not the worst of who we are. Yo, this is the 2020 elections we're talking about. 2020 doesn't stand for the year, it stands for the number of people running.
That's about right, too.
And if you guys want some kind of fight fire with fire candidate, you know, you can go with somebody else. That's not me. I ran a fire department as a mayor. It's not a good strategy putting out fire. We have to be in this moral moment a nation of activist love.
Yes.
Because I want to tell you, a lot of people want to simply point fingers at Donald Trump and think removing him from office suddenly gets us back to being a nation. That's not true. I hear Democrats now, they say the number one thing they want is just to beat Donald Trump. That's right. And I'm like, God, can't we have bigger ambitions than that?
Yes.
Beating Donald Trump is the floor, it's not the ceiling.
Right. All right now.
This is out of the valley.
All right.
The challenges we have in our nation were going on long before Donald Trump was elected.
That's right.
We've been driving senior citizens into poverty before Donald Trump was elected.
Amen.
We have a criminal justice system that is so broken it treats a person better if they're rich and guilty than if they're poor and innocent. That was going on before Donald Trump.
That's right.
Go around South Carolina. Go around most states. We have children drinking unclean water being poisoned because their air and their water. That was going on before Donald Trump. Veterans coming home with invisible injuries. Suicide rates for our veterans are stunningly high. These are not just the tests of trying to beat Donald Trump. These are tests of who we are. This election is not a referendum on one man and one office. It's a referendum on who we are and who we must be to each other. Yes. And I say that this is a moment in America where we need a revival of civic grace. Yes. We need a more courageous empathy for one another. We need to understand that we are a nation of patriots and it demands patriotism. And whatever leader we elect, we got to understand that you can't lead the people if you don't love them.
That's right.
I'm going to take your questions, but I would be wrong if I didn't tell the end of the story I told about me moving into the home. Because the story didn't end that way. You see, I went off to college, got my 2 degrees from Stanford, was Rhodes Scholar in Oxford. I came back to law school, got my law degree from Yale. My dad was not happy. It's like, boy, you got more degrees in the month of July, but you ain't happy. Life is not about the degrees you get, it's about the service you give.
All right.
I know a lot of dumb people got a lot of letters after their names. I don't judge you by what you got, I judge you by what you give. How you live. And so, guess what the first job I did out of law school was? I went to inner city Newark, New Jersey, and started work as a housing rights activist. Why? Because you heard the story. People fought for my housing rights. I can't pay it back to them. Got to pay for it. My whole life is about purpose, not position. It's about fighting for people who are too often left out of the equation, looked down upon, left aside. You want to know where I'm going to be? This last week, I'm campaigning for president. This last week, I was in a prison. Because my faith teaches me Matthew 25. Did you visit me in prison?
That's right.
You want to know what I've been doing this last week or this campaign? I went over to Juarez, Mexico. Found 5 women who came here for asylum, escaping attacks, escaping sexual assaults, and were denied the ability to even present for asylum in this country. I went to the Senate and wanted to do what a lot of senators do that have a high sense of self-regard. I decided to write a book. And if your name is Booker, it's a lot of pressure. Expectations on your book writing if your name is Booker. And so I had to fact check all the stories of my childhood. My father passed, so I had to find out how big the dog was. And so I go back to find those activists from the 1960s who helped my family move into New Jersey. And they were easy to find. The head of the organization was easy to find because at 92 years old, she is still the head of the New Jersey Fair Housing Council. Now, she doesn't represent black folks anymore. Lots of black folk live in my community. She actually now represents same-sex couples. She represents Americans with disabilities. She represents Muslim families because to her, justice has no color.
That's right.
Justice has no race, no religion. It is one justice, one nation, one love. She confirms a lot of the facts. It was not a pack of wolves. And she tells me to go find a lawyer to confirm the rest of the story. This is really what I want to end with, and let's get to the question. I go to find the lawyer, and he's an 84-year-old retired judge. And I call him up and say, "Hi, sir, I know who you are." I'm like, okay. And he confirms all the facts of the story. But then after I get all my questions for my chapter, I had to ask him one question that just popped out for me. I hadn't written it down, but suddenly I wanted to know why. Why would he said he was a young man when he started working and helping families like mine. He said he was a young man who just started his career, was barely making ends meet, was struggling to make it. And I'm like, well, why then would you take so much time out to help black families at a time that there was fears of white flight, real estate prices going down, blacks moved into your neighborhood? Why would you do what you did at the time that you did, when you were struggling economically yourself? And he says, Cory, I remember the moment I made the decision. I go, the moment? What was the moment? He goes, it was March 7th, 1965. Now, I read a lot of history, but that date didn't strike a bell with me. For some of you, it might, but at that point, I still didn't know what he was talking about. I go, okay, what was happening on March 7th, 1965? And he goes, well, I was just sitting home on my couch watching TV at the end of a long work week. Now, I do that all the time. Usually, I hang out with my two best friends, Ben and Jerry. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. And yet this is 1965, he says he's watching TV. Now, I see some young people in here who have no idea that there was a time in America, long ago, when we only had 3 channels and they would end at 11 o'clock. Time to do something else. Go to bed. That was the time to go to bed. Now people staying up all night, Netflixing and chilling. And so he's watching TV. I looked up the movie he was watching. Most of America on this night was watching a movie called Judgment at Nuremberg.
Oh, wow.
But something happened on March 7th, 1965, right during this movie. They broke away from an ongoing TV movie because breaking news was happening. And suddenly he says he's watching this movie and they shift over to a bridge in Alabama called the Edmund Pettus Bridge.
That's right.
Because on March 7th, 1965, these marches started in Selma and were trying to march to Montgomery, and they got stopped on that bridge by Alabama state troopers. That's right. Who would not let them pass. And what he watches next was, he said, horrifying to him there in New Jersey. He saw these marchers get tear gas, and then they stormed in with billy clubs and started viciously beating him. Now, one of those marchers, always my hero, now I have this life where he's my colleague, a man named John Lewis.
I love him. I love him.
John Lewis said to me, very humble, he's a regal man, but so humble, he says to me, Cory, I shed a little bit of blood on that word. I'm like, obviously, no, sir, you had your head cracked open. You were knocked unconscious, you were carried back to the church.
That's right.
Now, what did a man 1,000 miles away in New Jersey do? This man on a couch in New Jersey did not just sit there and say somebody should do something about it.
That's right.
He didn't do what I sometimes have happen to me, which is you allow your inability to do everything to undermine your determination to do something. No, he stood up and said, I got to do something. I got to go to Alabama. And then he realizes he can't even afford a plane ticket to Alabama, not to mention close his business. So then he decided to do what is a great American tradition. He just said, you know what, I'm just going to do the best I can with what I have where I am. And he starts thinking to himself, okay, I can afford maybe 1 hour of pro bono work a week. And he calls around to try to find out who needs some help. He finds this young woman who's leading an organization called the Fair Housing Council. He's like, hallelujah, thank you, Jesus, needs some help. And the two of them start working, and he says 1965 turns to 66. And they get better at what they're doing. 67, 68, he gets other lawyers involved. And he says, now we got this whole scheme going, this conspiracy going. And he goes, then it becomes 1969, and he says, Cory, I'll never forget the day I get a case file handed to me of this young couple coming up from the South, trying to move into my neighborhood, my community. And he goes, you know what the names on that file were, Cory? And I go, no, sir, I don't. He goes, well, the names were Cory and Carolyn Booker, your parents. I am literally standing before you right now. I am a United States Senator. I am a candidate for the highest office in our land. Because a man on a couch watching civil rights activists did not just sit there. He stood up when a moral moment came before his eyes. He took responsibility and didn't just point fingers of blame. He got engaged and involved. In just an hour a week he began, but he changed the destiny of a generation not yet born.
Yeah.
This is the power of who we are. Yes, we are in dark times, but we are called to be the light. Yes, there are people preaching hate, doing hate, vicious, violent actions, but we can bring the love. This election is going to be about a lot of policy issues, but undergirding this election is the call of our country. Who will we be in the generations ahead? Will we just be tacticians and try to beat folks or talk about what we're against? Or will we stand up and talk about what we are for and who we are for? We are Democrats, most of us in this room, but do not let people define us as a party as trying to beat Republicans when this moral moment calls for us to unite all Americans. I am running for president because I believe in us. I believe in love. I believe that when Americans come together and stand together in common cause and common purpose, there is nothing we can't do. And I know that is not just a hope, that is our destiny. Oh, it's open. Okay, we took more than 25 questions last night. We behind to set a record. They told me the last presidential candidate took only 5. So I'm going to try to go as quickly as I can. Ask me questions about anything. I don't care how obscure your question is. If you want to know how much I save on hair products every year, this is the most economical hair product. All right, so I'm going to go right here in front of you. You got a question? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, my name is I reside in Conway, but I'm also here as a representative of AARP.
Amen.
Amen. I have this big t-shirt.
Yes.
I have a lot of questions. Because I have this t-shirt.
Okay.
I don't think the mic is on.
It is. We hear you. We hear
Because I
you.
have this t-shirt on, I want to know what are you going to implement for the drug companies and the corporate section of the drug companies to reduce those prices, people at.
Yes.
I can give you an example of some of the medications that I'm on, which is not a lot, but I know a lot of seniors are on a lot of medications and their prices keep going up and up and up. Right? What are you going to do?
All right.
Maybe in your first 100 days?
No, I would say more than my first 100 days because we got to deal with this issue now. Every American is paying outrageous amounts. Average American over $1,000 every year for their medications. And we all know people in this room that are literally rationing their own drugs. The doctor tells them we need this, but they can't afford it. And we see people dying in this nation because they're rationing their insulin or other urgently needed things. As these companies profiteer off of our pain. Now that's a serious charge, but let me be clear. When a company develops a drug, especially using our tax dollars for the research, and then they say to Americans, you're going to pay 100 times for that cost of that drug in this country than we're paying in other countries, then you know people are profiteering off of people's pain. And so I want you to know, you can know my behavior already because I'm on a whole bunch of bills and have written bills in the Senate that under this president aren't getting done. So let me tell you specifically a few things we're going to do. The first one is I believe in the carrot and the stick, okay? And right now, if I'm your president, I'm going to say if you're a company that raises the price of your drug higher in our country than in others, we are going to take away your patents and let generic drugs undercut your prices because we will not allow that to happen. Number two is we're going to use the power of negotiation, which right now is not being done with Medicare and Medicaid. We buy bulk drugs, one of the biggest drivers for the cost. We're going to use that to negotiate down drugs. Number three is I wrote a bill with Senators Casey and Senator Sanders to say let's have a safety valve too, to allow safe importations from other countries. Because if they're selling the drugs cheaper over there, we're going to make sure we have a flow of those cheaper drugs here to drive down the cost. If I'm telling you this right now, this is such a big pain point for so many people. If we will win this fight, we will not allow drug companies to make unjust profits off of the pain of people. We're going to make prescription drugs affordable in this country once and for all.
Both the families, the addicts, and to deal with the pharma companies that make these drugs.
I'm so happy you said the families too, because often attention is on the person suffering from the disease of addiction and don't talk about the families as well. So let me answer all three parts of your questions. First of all, picking up from here on these drug companies, is I am going to have a Department of Justice that is going to relentlessly go after these drug companies and hold them responsible. They will pay billions and billions of dollars under my leadership to fund the next part of my question, which is how are we going to deal with the opioid crisis in and of itself? And that means there's even drugs out there that help people deal with the opioid addiction, but those are being priced such that people can't afford it. So we are going to...
And then they stay on those and they're
Exactly. But let's not think that we're helpless in this. There's a whole bunch of evidence that shows that there are things that actually work for driving down addiction, that work for people who've already survived an overdose, that have incredible results in terms of them never going back to that situation, like peer-to-peer counseling when at the point of overdose. And so one of the things that frustrates me as a United States Senator is we're not funding those strategies and building them out to scale. And if this is one of the #1 causes of death in America right now, it's causing our life expectancy rate to go down. We're not treating this with the sense of urgency and the devastating impact it's having on individuals and their families. And so from everything from holding drug companies accountable, to investing in solutions that work, to stopping the easy availability of these drugs that are unnecessary, to making sure law enforcement's doing their job in preventing a lot of these opioids from coming into our country in the first place. I have a comprehensive plan to deal with this and to make sure, #1, it's not just lip service, but we're making the massive investments in our programs at work to stop this.
People, like a lot of many people don't have insurance, like the treatment, even to be able to go get the help.
So I live across the street from a drug treatment center. Again, I live in an inner city community, and when I go over and sit with the fellas there, and a lot of times I'll bring food, and then they get mad at me because I bring vegan food. But no, in all seriousness, the stories that they tell about being arrested time and time, and dozens of times before they even get treatment. We have a system that is so perverse, it's actually costing us more money not dealing with this situation than if we make the investments. So whether it's the cost of drugs or the availability of treatment, if you are at a point where you're asking for treatment and then they tell you you have to wait for a month, 6 months just to find a bed, we have a crisis in this country that we can't point a finger of blame. We have to say that we are letting down folks who are struggling in this crisis. And so, as a person who knows this area, works with the Integrity House, it's named the group across the street, I'm going to make sure that the things that work, treatment, early intervention, the medications that are helpful, the peer-to-peer counseling, the law enforcement, holding drug companies accountable, we have a comprehensive plan to deal with this crisis and end it. Okay? I'm going to go over here to my right because as a Democrat I want to show that I got the flexibility.
Hi, my name is Gail. I'm from Bucksport, South Carolina.
All right, Gail.
Understand that?
How do you spell Gail?
G-A-Y-L-E.
Oh, I like that spelling. That's how I have a friend named Gail King. She's the media now. She can't talk to me that much anymore. She spells her name right. And she keeps so calm, cool, and collected. R. Kelly's yelling at her. Okay, go ahead.
From my mother.
All right.
Who is a senior as well. All right. She's don't get Medicare. She get Medicaid.
Yes.
She got a supplement insurance.
Yes.
She's at the point now she need help, but she can't get no help because one won't do it, the other won't do it. Doesn't say I can't do nothing because this one ain't doing it and that ain't doing it. Where's the help come?
Thank you for asking.
Please, somebody tell me.
Okay. So this is the question.
This is gonna be hard.
Yes.
Somebody get that microphone to Gail. Y'all
Yes.
know
So this is
this.
the question I've been waiting for, Gail. Because I want to say something that you don't hear. Because everybody talks about Medicare and Medicaid. I want to tell you right now, the way Medicaid is right now, in my opinion, is it's broken.
That's right.
Yes.
What I mean by it's broken.
Yes,
we have a
it
Medicaid
is.
system that if you're a senior and you're aging, we tell you you don't qualify for a lot of stuff until you bleed through all of your savings and get into the poorhouse. And then we still don't provide enough to now help you when you have no money to get anything that you want to do because you have to go through it. How much is that? That so strips the dignity from our elders. It is so unjust and so wrong. And so we have completely scrapped this. We have a whole new plan about long-term care. And let me give you some. No. It is the Booker plan. You haven't tried the Booker plan. The first thing I want you to do is dollar the days where you have to bleed through your life savings. We're lifting the income cap and we're lifting the savings cap so you don't have to do that anymore. And if you want to try to hold on to your resources, not only for your needs, but you might want to, you've worked all your life to have a little bit to pass on to your children, that ends underneath. Number two is we are going to start valuing seniors and their choices. What if you want to age at home? Right now, we don't give resources and support for people that want to make that decision. So number one, we're going to end the institutional bias that biases towards people going into nursing homes and the like, and doesn't bias to people staying home. And so here's two things, Gail, that you might like to hear. Number one is we're going to put more resources to folks who want to age at home through our systems of Medicaid and Medicare. But even better than that, even additionally better than that, is for those people who are the caregivers.
That's right.
Who are taking care of a spouse or even a special needs child. We don't honor that work in this country. And as a mom who took care of a father with Parkinson's and dementia, that is hard work. You go through your money, you go physically. My mom trying to pick up my father, hurt herself, injured herself. All of this is nonsense. That should be considered work. And so what I'm going to do is expand what's called the Earned Income Tax Credit and change the definition of work in our country who qualifies for that. And so if you are a home health care worker taking care of a spouse or a child or whomever, or your mom, then you are going to qualify for thousands of dollars back from our government as well. For the caregivers, we're going to put a lot more money in your pocket. For those seniors, we're going to change the institutional bias so we give our elders the dignity and respect to choose how and where they want to age. And then the last thing I want to say is, again, Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security are not getting the resources we need. And so the last thing I want to mention is just her Social Security checks. Think about this for a second. We have one party that generally tells you that Social Security is broken and insolvent. That is a lie. People have been paying into Social Security the whole life. Let me tell you how we fix. Let me tell you how the Booker plan to fix this. It's very simple. Social Security tax, I'm sure for everybody in here, you all should know that you are paying what's called a regressive tax.
Right.
Which means that if you've been making $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year in your life, you're paying a much higher percentage in Social Security taxes than that person making $1 million a year or $1.5 million a year. Because we've capped off Social Security payments. If we just lift that cap for higher earners, and literally this would just affect the top 2, 3, 4%. My plan of the top 2, 3, 4%. We would not only have enough money to make Social Security solvent, but what I'm going to do is that would give us enough money to expand Social Security payments for those seniors right now whose Social Security checks don't go far enough to keep them above the poverty line. So I'm going to expand Social Security, change Medicaid and Medicare, give advantages to people who are home health care aides, and give choice and dignity back to our seniors who want to age on their own terms. I'm going to go to the young man, but I also want to go to the woman next to him. So can we go ladies first, young man, and then we'll come to you. You're a gentleman. You're a gentleman. Truly a gentleman.
I'm Jordan, and I was born and raised here in Bucksport.
Okay, stop in the name of love, because your last name is Jordan, which is my mother's maiden name. I'm calling you cousin.
I have a question in reference to universal health care.
Yes.
Is that part of your plan for the health care situation that we have now, or are you planning to expand on the affordable health care?
I love that question. Thank you.
And what will this do in reference to private insurance companies?
Thank you.
And the employee-employer relationship?
Thank you very much. So this is what you see these debate stages, that all this talk and fighting about, and I'm one of these people, so I'm time out here. We all agree on something, and if you don't agree, you can let me know later, but I think all Americans agree on the fact that in this country, the richest nation on the planet, healthcare should be a right for all of our citizens. That's the standard for me. That nobody should have to bankrupt their family because they need health care. That's the standard for me. That no one who needs a prescription drug should ever have to put it aside because they can't afford it. And by the way, not having that standard has caused havoc in our economy. We are almost at the point now where 1 out of every $5 we spend in America is on health care. And let me tell you why. Because we have a system that's designed to make people sicker before they get treated. Because I know so many people that have something going wrong with them, but they put it off because they can't afford the copay.
That's true.
They can't afford the out-of-pocket expenses.
That's right.
And so they wait. And then what happens? And one day they end up in the emergency room when the care is so much more expensive and their issue is so much more serious.
Yes.
We don't have a system that is designed to what makes care cheaper. Early intervention, early detection, and prevention. And this is the problem in our society right now. And I gotta put it plain. We have a system that has so much profiteering baked in. Now insurance companies, trust me, I know that there's a lot of people who have insurance think they've got good health care until they get sick. And then their insurance company tells them they're not paying for something.
That's true.
And now suddenly they're in the same problem again.
That's right.
And so we have to have a system that is working a lot better. That's why I'm one of these people that says the ideal for me is Medicare for all. And now look, that starts controversy in our party.
Yeah.
But I want you to know I was a mayor. And I'm not a person that allows perfect to be the enemy of the good. And Lord knows when it comes to healthcare, we need a lot of good being done. So if I was going to design this system, I would definitely be designing the Medicare for all system, where you go to the doctor when you get preventative care, you go to the doctor, you can afford the visit, the prescription drugs, all of that. But the pathway to get there is where a lot of people are having to fight here in the Democratic Party right now. And as a guy, I want to tell you what I'm going to be working towards, what's my gold standard, but I'm going to tell you right now, the first thing we need to do, the first president needs to stop they're ripping apart of the Affordable Care Act. Very first day in office, day one, I can stop the rollback of the Affordable Care Act. This president's attacking me. He stopped the kind of payments that are helping to keep premiums low. He stopped even advertising all of the networks, which helps to get more healthy people in, lower prices. So the very first thing you got to do is stop the hemorrhaging and secure the ground that we got under the former president. And then the next thing we have to start doing is making progress every day to lowering costs and expanding care. I think the first step will likely have to be a public option. Because I talk to unions in our party, which is, to me, we need to be expanding unions dramatically. My brother, sisters, and cousins in South Carolina, your state has unions under attack. But I talked to a union out in Nevada, one of the biggest unions, who said, look, we don't want to give up our health care plan. We negotiated for this. So there's got to be a period where we create a public option and show that it can work. And remember, private insurers charge 15% overhead. Medicare is just 2%. If we do Medicare right, we're going to outcompete the private insurance companies. And that's the way it should happen. People should realize that that way of going is not going to work. Entrepreneurs will start seeing, wait a minute, I can buy into Medicare for my employees a lot cheaper than I could on a private insurance plan. And so what I'm going to show is that this is the way to go by creating a very strong, viable public option. And I don't care what everybody says, all the candidates have been on, and the senators at least, have been on public option bills to make sure that we can show that they can work. So that's my plan. But remember, every day of my presidency, every single day, I'm going to work to march forward more care, lower cost, greater access. That's the cause every single day. And I believe we are going to get to the day where we look back on these draconian days, like we look back on the days before we had public education in America, like how could we have ever been a country where everybody didn't have a right to a great public school? Well, it's going to be the same thing. How could we ever been a country that denied people health care just because they couldn't afford it? Okay? All right. The gentleman here.
I want to ask, what are you going to do to help kids in general from school shootings and protect them?
I just want to first say Elijah has made me very upset that he got more applause than I did. Thank God you got to be 35 or to be president. Elijah, first of all, your poise, standing up, the way you spoke confidently in front of everyone. You deserve every applause that you got. And can you imagine, this should not be a question. The fact that he's going to school now and not only learning about reading, writing, and arithmetic, but we're actually teaching our kids. The best we can do to protect them is to teach them how to shelter in place and deal with an active shooter. We live in a distraught present. And I want you to know that I'm looking at you, and I'm saying this to you as a guy that used to be a young man like you, that the greatest chance that you are going to pass away in your life as a young black boy is unfortunately through gunfire. That is a terrible thing to say.
Right.
But I'm going to change that. We are going to change that. And the way we're going to change this is, number one, taking the fight to the corporate gun lobby and the NRA against common sense gun safety law.
That's right.
And I want to tell you, Elijah, because this is a very personal issue to me, because I'm the only person in this race who has people shot in his neighborhood. Shabbat Smith shot at the top of my block with an assault rifle. We've had so many people shot in my neighborhood in my community the last month alone. I live every day with a sense of urgency because my family lives in that community. And so I have a comprehensive plan to stop that, but everybody's got a plan. The question is how do you get it done?
That's right.
And so I'm telling you right now, as your president, this is not going to be a secondary priority for me. I will swear an oath, and the number one responsibility as the President of the United States is the defense of his country or her country. And right now, we are seeing a level of carnage in our nation. More people have died in the last 50 years due to gun violence in our country than every single war combined going back to the Revolutionary War. And so I know how to get things done. I transformed a city that people said couldn't be transformed. And the way you do that is by igniting the power of the people. The majority of Americans, the majority of gun owners agree with me on the common sense changes. I will make this a priority. I will organize. I will awaken the conscience of this country, and I will expand the moral imagination of this nation. We are going to end this nightmare in our country and have the kind of common sense gun safety so that no child in America will ever have to ask for it. ACLU voter! Come on, man. I love the ACLU. We've got like all these biblical names. Elijah. If the next person who asks a question is named Abraham, I'm going to be upset. All right, no.
I wanted to know something I've always wondered about presidential candidates. How do you manage being a full-time candidate and a full-time senator?
Wow, that's a great question. So two things I'm going to say. One is little sleep. But the other thing is, I learned this as mayor. You got to build great teams.
That's it.
And so for me, one of the hardest lessons I learned, first of all, we elect a lot of people in America to run things like a country or a state or a city who've never run things before. And so my experience as a chief executive, one of the first lessons I had to learn was that you have to build a great team around you. Now, when I got to the Senate, let me tell you, I was a senator, and I realized right away when I walked into the Senate that we had a crisis. That the Senate Democrats didn't have great teams. You know why? Because the teams weren't diverse. I walked in, and I still remember leaving late one night because I worked long hours, and I saw in the Senate, I saw entire committees like the Judiciary Committee that didn't have minorities. I couldn't find minorities on it. And women were underrepresented. And I still remember one of the first nights leaving the Senate, I saw a line for the night shift to come in, and it was almost all African American coming in to clean the place. And so I just said enough. I went to a guy named Chuck Schumer, who's the head of the Senate. Good man, he's worthy of a few applause. And I said to him, with another friend of mine, Brian Schott, Senator from Hawaii, I said, why don't we ask every senator to have to report out their diversity statistics? And suddenly every senator had to be accountable to how many women they had on their staff, how many minorities they had on their staff. And guess what happened to the teams in the Senate? They quickly changed because people knew they were going to be accountable. And so what I believe as building teams, if you build teams, first and foremost, is share your values that are competent and qualified and reflect the communities that you're trying to serve. I've got a Senate staff led by an incredible woman, my chief of staff. She and I built a great team on my Senate staff, and so I'm standing here right now, but my Senate staff is hard at work. And I get lots of text messages during the day of things that I have to do. And often I have to shoot down to Washington. I was one of the people this week demanding that we go back into session right now to deal with this gun crisis. Right now, as your president, I'm going to build an incredible team all around me. Starting with my vice president, she will be an amazing woman. And if your family will let me draft you early, I consider having a no on my team as well. All right? All right, let me come over here. Yes.
Last question.
This is the last question. Can I do two more questions? Crystal needs like him. Go ahead.
Please don't make this last question. Senator, thank you for coming to Ori. I don't know if you're familiar, but we had about 2,000 flood victims from Hurricane Florence less than a year ago. I'm one of those victims, and so one of the things that I'm really concerned about is how to make sure we're protecting people and property and reducing flood risk. Senator Tim Scott has proposed S2008, and I'm hoping that you'll support him with that bill. But also, can you talk a little bit about how you want to prepare communities to mitigate the impacts of a changing precipitation and also climate change.
So I appreciate you saying, I appreciate you bringing up Tim's name because Tim's a Republican, I'm a Democrat, but he's one of my best friends in the Senate. And we work across the aisle on a lot of bills.
He's awesome.
In fact, we actually work together to do something called opportunity zones, which is helping to drive a lot of funding into rural and urban low-income areas. So I'm glad that you mentioned, Tim, an environment. We are too reflexively partisan. As I always say, we've got to unite this country and create new American majorities to get things done. And that means we need a presidential candidate and a president that's not talking all the time, the Democrats this, the Republicans this, but is creating a relationship. So Tim and I go into a Republican chairman's office on Thursdays. I haven't been doing that a lot because I've been running around, but we do Bible study together. And that joining together, those kind of bonds and things like that really help you build relationships. So let me just tell you right now, directly answering your question is, we deal with this in New Jersey with sea level rising and the flooding we're now seeing in cities like Atlantic City. If our country does not put forward a Marshall Plan for climate resiliency, as well as climate mitigation of stopping the threat of climate change, even if we did nothing right now, even if we stopped climate change right now, the flooding problems would persist. We need to be investing in climate resiliency in a significant way. I'm talking the tune of over $1 trillion. Because right now it's not just your state. I could go through the Midwest where they're having flooding problems. I can go down to Florida where they're having flooding problems. And the cost of inaction, you know this, because you're bearing the cost. The billions, hundreds of billions of dollars in damage here in the South alone. You start adding in the Midwest, you start adding in the South, the Gulf Coast, you start adding in the two coasts. Now you're starting to talk trillions and trillions of dollars. We know this, everybody knows the wisdom of our elders. A stitch in time saves nine. And that's what we need to be doing, and that's what I'm putting forward in my climate plan as well as my infrastructure plan. I'm going to quickly go over here. Thank you. You're very welcome.
Thank you.
What are your thoughts on a heartbeat bill? If there isn't heartbeat, there is life. What are your thoughts?
So this is one of the most controversial issues. And I hear this a lot. People talking about the issue of abortion and trying to fight over this issue. And it's an area where we see, I think, a lot of understandable disagreement, but I think there's a lot more common ground. So I just want you to know very clearly where I stand. I support Roe v. Wade, and I think it should be codified as well. A lot of these laws right now, I think, are undermining ultimately the most difficult decision people have to make shouldn't be made by politicians. It should be made, we should trust women. I hope I still get applause, but I just want to be very clear with you. We should be doing everything we can to reduce unwanted pregnancies in our country.
That's right.
And this should be common ground. And let me tell you, I am an evidence-based guy. I believe in, I used to say when I was mayor, in God we trust, but everybody else bring me data. If you're not a deity, I want to say, I trust in the Lord. You got to show me some numbers. I trust lots of people. Love lots of people, but I've learned to trust numbers better. So let's talk about this issue. We actually, people who think that they are somehow lowering the rates of abortions by stripping women away from their rights are actually wrong. The data plays that out. The states that have lowered the rates of abortion most dramatically, and I'm using Colorado as an example, are the states that realize, wait a minute, if we empower women, we actually dramatically lower. Colorado, more than 40% reduction in abortions by doing what? Giving low-income women access to free contraception. So think about this. Think about this. There are these fights and awful things going on in states, literally like Alabama's law that says, God bless America, that we are going to give worse of a sentence to a doctor than we are to rapists or people committing incest. So if I'm your president, I know this is an issue with this heartfelt, sincere people on both sides of the issue. But I'm going to be one that believes in empowering women, believes in evidence-based sex education, believes in providing low-income women the kind of things that give them more control and more choice in their lives, is principally giving them access to affordable contraception. Okay? Now look. You already put the microphone in his hand. You're one of my men, so I got it. This is the last question. Crystal's mad at me. Where's Crystal? Where'd she go? She walked out. Now she's coming back to my quilt. I'm mad at you, Cory. I'm taking your quilt. All right, Crystal. Hold on. Mayor Culver, put your hand up. The mayor's with me. He's not only endorsing me, he's working on my campaign. All right, the last question. You brought your muscle. You brought your bodyguard with me. Brilliant and beautiful. You look so smart, Aubrey. Are you smart, Aubrey? Yes, you are. Okay.
My name's Martha.
It is smart.
I'm going to play a little off of Elijah, because especially with the past weekend, those events have weighed heavy on my heart. Because when Aubrey was 6 weeks old, a gunman walked into that elementary school and slaughtered 20 children. I know. And I remember looking at my husband and saying, this is it. This is the event that is going to change everything, that's going to stop it. So I don't have to raise my baby going into first grade worrying that something like that can happen to her. And it got struck down. And on the way here this morning, her reality is, I said, baby, are you excited about being a presidential candidate? We're going to meet everybody. I mean, we are very open in my family. And I want my girl, I have 3 girls, I want them all to play a part, even as children. She looked at me and said, kind of, what if there's a shooting? Because that's her reality. At 6 years old, that she understands walking out of her house and coming back and saying, is a blessing that we take for granted now. So my question is, here in South Carolina, where, my husband is a hunter. My husband loves his guns. But how do we convey to our neighbors that all we're trying to convey to them is, we're not trying to take your gun. We're not trying to impede on your Second Amendment rights. However, how do you not understand that having a weapon capable of slaughtering 20 children in under 30 seconds is not okay? How do we convey that to our southern friends that just don't get it?
So, I mean, this is where we are right now, right? Where we have fear and we have faith. And I want to tell you, I want to be very personal with everybody about why I'm driven in the way that I am on this issue. Because it was 2004, it was my birthday, and I was walking in my neighborhood. As I told you, I live in an inner city community that's beautiful, and we don't confuse in my community wealth with worth. And as I'm climbing a hill in my neighborhood, gunshots ring out. And I turn, there happened to be an off-duty police officer right behind me. I run towards where the shootings were, and there was a 19-year-old teenager who was shot in the chest. Now, this is why I sometimes have problems with the way we show violence on TV, because it is so gruesome. We lay this boy on the grass, and then I just tried to stop him from bleeding, and the blood seemed to be coming. My dad was there with me, and I told him to when the paramedics came, pushed me out of the way, I knew he had died. And I still remember telling my dad to go home and wait for me. Now I was living in some high-rise projects, and this view that when I open the door and my father looks at me and sees his son covered in another boy's blood, And my dad, who has a great sense of humor, a great spirit, at that point I couldn't even speak to him because I was descending into a dark place of fear and anger and hurt and rage and trauma. And so I pushed past my dad and I got into the bathroom and I closed the door and I tried to scrub this boy's blood off of me and I just broke. I was so angry at my country that here we have again another black boy being killed. Time after time, day after day, dozens and dozens of Americans being killed. And where is the outrage? I got in the shower, and I know some folks here have done this before, but I just turned the water on so hot, hoping that the pain on the outside could somehow numb the pain on the inside. And I came out of the shower, my dad and I don't even remember a conversation, but I know we must have said something, but I went to bed that night. The next morning I wake up and I get up early in the morning and I go down in the elevator and I come out to the lobby of the building I live in. These projects, they faced each other. And as I'm walking through that lobby, I remember that in that building is our spiritual leader is a woman named Virginia Jones, an elderly African-American woman who, since the buildings were built in 1969, she had always been the tenant president. And her son was murdered in the lobby of the building I was just walking through. Jesus. Now this woman never left. She made enough money to leave these low-income housing projects. But she never left because I asked her once, I go, Ms. Jones, such a horrible lawsuit, why are you still here? And she looked at me almost amused by the question. She goes, why am I still here? I go, yes, Ms. Jones. She goes, why am I still in apartment 5A? I go, that's what I asked, Ms. Jones. She's like, why am I still the tenant president after all these years? I go, yes, Ms. Jones. Why? And she says to me, because I'm in charge of Homeland Security. She knew that what hope is in the absence of despair and wretchedness and pain and trauma. Hope is the active conviction that despair will never have the last word.
Wow.
And as I walked through that lobby and into the courtyard, as the sun was coming up, the only other person in the lobby, and this is where I know sometimes my faith is that God is real, because the only person in that courtyard who could have possibly reached me in this moment of hurt and anger was Miss Virginia Jones. And her back was towards me, and I stopped in that courtyard feeling like I'm on 100 feet of water, screaming in pain and hurt and anger at this country. And then, as if she heard me, she turns around and she sees me. And she says nothing. All she did across that courtyard was open her arms. And I'm 6'3", she's 5 feet and a smidgen. But I ran across that courtyard like a little boy and felt like I disappeared into her arms as she held me, and I broke. I just started crying. And she knew what had happened the day before in our neighborhood. And so she just starts rubbing my back, and she says 2 words over and over again, just soothing my heart. And they're 2 words that have nothing to do with religion. They have nothing to do with pie in the sky when we die. They have everything to do about the substance of how we got here as a people. As an American people, they have everything to do with how we overcame wretchedness and pain and hurt like none of us can imagine that our ancestors endured. And there are 2 words that she said that I uttered over and over again in my toughest days as mayor of a tough city. I uttered these 2 words. I uttered these 2 words when I became a senator on the hardest days where I feel like I'm banging my head against an implacable wall of resistance. And there are 2 words I even say now to my friend Noah. I say these words now when the campaign trail gets hard and I am so tired. I say these 2 words. And so what she said as she rubbed my back over and over, she simply said, stay faithful. Stay faithful. Stay faithful. And so I tell you all right now, I'm not here to tell you it's all going to be apple pie in the sky. We got hard days ahead of us.
That's right.
We got real struggles. And it's bigger than just winning an election. I make no affirmations that I am the perfect person, the at the time that we need, because I lean heavily on the Lord. And I lean on each other. We gotta lean on each other, because that's where our strength comes from. We gotta lean on each other, because whenever 2 or 3 are gathered together, He is in the midst. The Jewish people say, keep it, tefillah l'chol mean. Whenever we're gathered together, He is in the midst. We got to lean on each other.
That's right.
We got to show that our strength is each other. We got to know that those leaders who try to divide us against each other, that is the enemy of the people, is when we are not united. Because when the people are united, we can't be defeated.
That's
And so I
right.
want you all to know who I am and the spirit I want to further ignite in this country. It is a spirit of hope. It is a spirit of love. It is a spirit of a deep, abiding civic faith that we have come a mighty long way, but we still can overcome in our generation. And if I have my way to Noah and Elijah and Martha and all these people reminded me at the time, we are called as a nation to be a place where justice rolls down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. Those days are coming. I promise you, we will get there.